The term society can be defined as the aggregate of people living together in more or less ordered community. In a modern American society, we most certainly have an ordered community. We all have a role to play in order to keep the American engine running. Our lives depend on it. Many believe we are more free today due to ownership and the appropriation of property, including ownership of oneself, which eventually leads to trade and currency, that in turn leading to the current economic system here in America. Today, all that must be done in order to provide for oneself and family is to seek employment. You can choose to work for someone else, or you can provide services and products to consumers directly. If you do not, however, participate in one of the two, you will ultimately find your way into poverty, requiring aid from government at the cost of those that do participate. In today's society, many have found their way into poverty, some by poor choice and some by design. In order to justify an expanding government, an impoverished class of people is required. A government intent on helping others in order to grow and thrive must have people to help. The help offered is a dangling carrot that keeps the impoverished going just enough to maintain the cycle. By creating a dependency in the impoverished community, government, in the name of charity, manages to keep a steady stream of impoverished people. Poverty in America is nothing like poverty in truly impoverished countries. Families that qualify in America are provided with minimum income and vouchers for food and even financial aid for climate control for their homes. They're offered health care that most middle-class homes can't afford, and free cell phones. The list goes on and on. Living in poverty is not easy compared to living in wealth, but because of how American society functions, poverty is manageable. Working Americans are the cornerstone of our society. Without them, poverty would be much less manageable, if it existed at all. Because without a working class, modern American society would be much, much different. Many years ago, when humans were hunters and gatherers, the idea of ownership, just in its most primitive form, people mostly lived together in small bands or families. They were self-sufficient and did not require employment or trade. Life was not easy at all. Shelters were built from scratch, food found in the forest or caught in traps. They would hunt and fish. It was a life that relied on labor and the generosity of Mother Nature. They did not depend on a government or a society to survive. They were truly free to provide for themselves. There were no property lines. There was no tax. The earth was their Walmart. There was no need for employment or trade, as an understanding of property or ownership was still early in phases throughout the world. One was free to do as they wished. The downside, with all of the labor involved in a self-sufficient life, was that there was not much time for leisure. Life consisted of processing the fruits of their labor into food, clothing, and shelter. This was a life without government, without a ruler, and without luxury. It was the freest of times, yet we were enslaved by life itself, forced to labor in exchange for survival. Today we witness a different type of slavery, a form of slavery unrealized by the majority of Americans. Today we are enslaved by society. One might think that we are free, and many preach of how free we are because of society. They attribute capitalism, the economy, and even socialism with making America more free. In a sense, perhaps they are right. In comparison to what I described earlier as the freest of times, perhaps we are more free today. We may not be without a ruler. We may not be truly free to do as we wish, and today we are required to be employed to avoid poverty. However, through trade, business, and a free market, we are able to labor less and even enjoy some luxury. We're able to maintain the impoverished so they do not have to live in the street and starve. Though that isn't unheard of completely, it's not the norm. We are able to enjoy the fruit of others' labors as well. All of this provided we participate in society as well, through employment in exchange for currency, which brings me to the contradiction of this freer society. In modern American society, one is required to work for someone else or join the impoverished. One could not provide for themselves alone if they wanted to. One must work for someone else, receive a voucher in the form of currency for that labor, and then use the currency earned to pay for what one needs. One must participate in society. America today runs off that idea. In fact, many countries do. It almost seems as if we have been tricked into this system which requires us to produce goods and service for others, and the only way out of this system is poverty. Not much of a choice, is it? One is not free to provide for oneself alone. Conformation is required. Even if one wanted to live off the grid, he is hit with multiple roadblocks, one of which is government regulation. The American government does not allow for one to truly live outside society. American society in and of itself is a roadblock to living off the grid. One of the things freedom lovers have embraced for centuries blocks the basic right to survive: food, water, and shelter. Those are the real necessities in life. These things are free in a world without property lines, without land ownership. We are free to seek these necessities without an issue. However, with property lines and society's right to defend them, it restricts anyone who wants to live off the land and be completely self-sufficient. It requires them to become slaves to an employer or a trade, just so they can provide themselves the necessities. Ability is restricted when one is not free to travel from one piece of land to the next. In many ways, it appears that modern American society restricts humans from being able to provide for their families organically, naturally, and self-sufficiently. Instead, he is forced to work for others so that he can provide for his family. In earlier times, labor was required to finding food, build shelters, make clothing, craft tools, and every other aspect of human life. In modern American society, labor is required as well, but instead of building our own tools and finding our own food, we use currency earned from employment to buy these necessities. Regardless of which lifestyle is the freest, regardless of which society is most enslaved, the fact that our existence revolves around a sense of forced labor makes us all slaves to life itself.